Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me. My name is Nick Pisciavadia. I am the Director of the Imperial Business Partners Program at Imperial, and I'm delighted to welcome you as corporate members of the Imperial Business Partners Program to this next installment in our webinar series. So the idea of these is to provide insight on important and relevant areas at the interface of science, technology, and business. And we want to stimulate collaboration with you as our members, and we'd love to work with you on things that relate to the subject being discussed. This particular webinar is on business evolution for society, and also serves as an introduction to the Leonardo Center at Imperial. It'll explore how businesses will evolve to face the pressing challenges facing humanity. And no doubt you have seen a lot of press around corporate sustainability in the headlines recently. So I think now's a fantastic time to be discussing this topic. And a great time to hear some of the Imperial insight in this area, the latest thinking. So exploring these issues will be two of our outstanding professors at Imperial College Business School. So these are Professor David Gann, OBE, who is Professor of Technology and Innovation Management, and Professor Maurizio Zollo, who's Professor of Strategy and Sustainability and Head of the Department of Management at Imperial College Business School. And you will have received their biographies in advance of this webinar and seen the significant achievements. I think they're terrifically distinguished and just well placed to discuss this topic today. So before we jump in, some housekeeping. If you could please ensure that you're on mute. I think the default is mute. And if you have questions, please do ask them, but please use the live chat function. So you should have the Zoom group chat window up on your screens, and you can post questions there at any time, should you have them, and we'll try and address them later in the webinar. So we're aiming to run for about 40 minutes. We'll see how the discussion goes and include some time to address Q&A. And Q&A will be under the Chatham House rule. So with that, let me hand over to Professor Gann and Professor Zollo.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, good afternoon, good lunchtime, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And let's see how we can go with some questions from you during our conversation. Primarily, I'm going to talk with Maurizio about the new Leonardo Center and stimulate the discussion with a few questions. And Maurizio, you've been interested and working on questions of corporate sustainability for some time, and this has become a very hot topic. Before we go any further with it, would you just like to give us a flavour of how we define corporate sustainability? What's in the tin? What's it look like? What is it about?
What's in it and what is not? This is a big question, David, as you know. We could go on for a long time. In a nutshell, it is about a radically new way to think about the purpose of the organization, first of all. So it's an innovation that has to do with the role of business within society. So not only, obviously, that includes product, processes, business models, but goes beyond those more regular type of innovation. And essentially it sees the business enterprise as aiming, right, as a purpose to create value, both economic and non-economic value, for the 5 major classes of stakeholders, right? In addition to the investors, of course, which is one class. You have customers, employees, suppliers, or business partners, and local communities, right? That clearly, has a number of consequences. For instance, in the way that companies also perceive the performance. What is the performance of a company also changes quite dramatically. If you take that perspective and that purpose, there are a lot of consequences that we'll have a chance to discuss.
So I presume that the opposite of corporate sustainability is that leadership in business gets one or another of these areas completely out of synchronicity with the purpose and then gets into trouble. and either the investor community decides that the business is not a good option, or its customers turn their back. And so the whole idea here is that we're crafting business strategy in a way that is more rounded and comprehensive in terms of
Integrated.
purpose.
Right. And it's much more integrated than it used to be.
Yeah.
Right. So, forever, the importance of making customers happy and, engaging with employees so that they're motivated and, making sure that, even local communities will be supportive. That's always been there, right? But now we're talking about actually integrating their interests and needs in the process of making strategic decisions. That's a very different animal. Right.
So let's just think of one or two examples. I mean, I've worked with Nestle, for example, and a few years ago they developed the concept of shared value in their supply chain, because they were concerned about maintaining, the coffee bean growing farms in, I don't know, Ecuador or somewhere. And if there was a drought or a season when they weren't producing so well, then they tried to keep those farmers alive and happy so they could supply them next year. That's the sort of thing
that's
on the ground.
One of the things, yes. I mean, it's only one aspect. So extending the responsibility, but also the logic of value creation to the suppliers, to the customers, right, to the whole value chain, not only from a responsibility perspective, because actually, guess what? If something goes wrong with one of the suppliers, remember the Nike case, right? So something goes wrong, it's Nike that lost half of its market value, right? Because of a supplier, hiring children. But it's not a question of responsibility anymore. It's not only a question of responsibility. Now it's a question of value creation. In order to maximize value creation, the company, the sustainable enterprise, has to really integrate and embed the both economic and non-economic aspects that are relevant for the whole value chain as well as the local communities.
So let me ask a question related to that, which is the why now question. I mean, some of these issues are not particularly new, but perhaps they're coming together. I mean, we use that term, the perfect storm, right?
Yes.
And we have perhaps more stress on leadership of companies these days because they've got to think about all of these aspects in order to make their decisions. Is that?
Yes. Well, there are a number of factors that are all coming to play at the same time, right? On one hand, you have huge mounting pressures on the environmental side. So climate change is on front pages.
Well, Greta Thunberg is embarrassing big leaders these days, quite right.
Yes, but it's not just her. I mean, it's the whole problem that now is becoming really unavoidable, and the responsibility of companies to be part of the solution, because obviously historically they've been part also of the problem, right, is unavoidable at this point. Changing the way that they actually design the product and the processes so that not only they reduce their climate change impact, carbon impact, but actually reduce the whole overall pollution, right? So getting closer and closer to the ideal of net zero pollution. So that's on the environmental side. And then of course the social aspects are also becoming more and more critical. Being competitive today means to be able to attract the best talent, and the talent is more and more sensitive, particularly the newer generations, to these themes. So if you want to get the best engineers, the best salespeople, guess what? You need to be credible and on these fronts, as well as on the standard.
So you're also saying that you can improve your competitiveness
Absolutely.
by thinking
That's what we're talking about.
through the strategy for sustainable business. I mean, I was struck not so long ago at BASF's attempts and desire to measure the carbon footprint of their own supply chain, and not just their own business that they're in control of, but to report in their annual reports how much carbon emission is coming from the whole supply chain that they use. Now, that would have profound consequences if we see companies competing through assembling that sort of data. So
yeah, sort of thing, that is the kind of positive competition.
Yeah.
Right. In a way, it's pre-competition that becomes essential. That's what exactly we're looking for, and that's what is happening really now. The basis for attracting not only the best employees, but also customers, investors are becoming extremely sensitive to this. BlackRock's is the CEO is sending a letter to all the top, so the CEOs of the top 1,000 Fortune 1000 companies every year. And if you read the last 3 or 4 letters, I mean, it's amazing the increasing amount of clarity and strength in his demand for showing not only the business case, but actually the social impact. It's not enough anymore to just look at the return, the pure return to investors. From the investor's perspective, it's equally important to show the social and environmental impacts, because they know that companies that have done investment on those other fronts are actually those that are returning better long-term returns for the investors as well.
Yeah.
And that is, by the way, now a fact, even from a research standpoint.
So let me ask you, Maurizio, given the remit of this agenda, what is it that you believe Imperial can do to insert some thought leadership through research, through engagement with business? We'll come on to our colleagues in the Imperial Business Partnerships in a minute at the end. And also, given our particular capabilities here, where we have deep science, climate science, we have very rigorous and leading edge technological understanding of what is shaping the world from a technology point of view. And then, of course, the business school where we're sitting currently. How are you starting to shape the Leonardo program and centre to play on these strengths? And what's going to be distinctive about that in terms of the offer from Imperial?
Thank you, David. I mean, this gives me the opportunity to kind of clarify, I think, one, frankly, I think unique aspects. There are a number of distinctive aspects, but one of the unique aspects of Imperial, really, which I have not found. I'm also a visiting professor at MIT, as you know, for being there for the last 6 or 7 years.
We don't hold that against you.
Thank you. That's good. But I'm saying, the amount of willingness to collaborate, embedded in the culture, deeply embedded in the way research centers, departments across all the schools at Imperial work with each other. I have just created this new research center literally 6 months ago, and have visited and met with directors of about 14, 15 different research institutes and centers, and the amount of enthusiasm and willingness to support in all sorts of ways. Research agendas, generating new ideas, sharing researchers, funds, sharing relationships and engagement with companies. I have never seen anything like that before in my academic
So I think
career.
I think knowing Imperial quite well as I do, it cuts both ways. I think people have a thirst you know, whether they're coming from engineering or the sciences or from medicine, to understand what can we do about these issues from a business point of view and an economic point of view. And they know that they won't necessarily see the fruits of their own research be taken forward unless
there is a valuable engagement of it. And that's what Leonardo is trying to do, right? So first of all, the board of trustees of the center is made up of the directors of some of the most important research institutes, or experts in climate change, environment, but also health, as well as a number of other relevant issues. The board that also you are kind enough to chair. The other aspects of this is actually the resources that we are developing, and then maybe we'll talk about a unique digital data set with more than 5 million sustainability initiatives that we have developed using algorithms developed and nurtured in-house. But more importantly, the capacity to leverage not only the internal community, right, invisible college of sustainability scholars across all the various sciences, but also a global community that was developed, that also developed over the years, in you know, from very different universities around the world, who are willing to engage companies in actual, you know, experimental work on the field, right? So it's an engagement.
So let's take two parts of this in a bit more detail. So Maurizio, let's open up some detail on what we offer and what Leonardo will be building on, because you've developed a unique data set. Everyone knows that Imperial works from evidence. It's a scientific institution. Absolutely. So, of course, when we're talking about corporate sustainability, what is the evidence? And it's one of those slightly amorphous terms. How do we put our arms around it? And you've spent a long time thinking about that, and you captured some really fabulous, unique data in what is now a rather large data set that sheds an interesting spotlight on how we understand what companies are doing. Do you want to just share a little bit of that? Because we can bring that into the room with our colleagues
and then we can
another time.
Sure. Well, so the key insight is the following. As of today, the assessment of sustainability of companies is made essentially by specialized analysts that look at the company as a whole and make subjective judgments on, you know, how the company is doing on the various issues, right, environmental and social issues that are supposed to be material for the company and for the sector. What we have thought to do, so that is clearly to go to the much more, the lower, you know, higher level of detail and look at the actual initiative, the behavior of each company. The problem of having a subjective assessment has actually been now researched a lot. You have very low correlation between the judgments of different analysts for the same company. Okay, they don't correlate with each other.
So your data set, just describe the size of it first. How many companies would you
So we're talking about 13,000 companies.
Right.
And
from all over the world?
From all over the world and across all sectors.
13,000 at the moment.
Yes, at the moment, there are all the companies that report on their sustainability on the basis of the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, which is the standard, the global standard today.
And how do you get that data?
Well,
what is the data?
We've developed, the data is about the description that is found automatically. So we've developed a number of algorithms to not only collect all the sustainability reports available on the internet, but also, this is the complex thing, to essentially identify the text related to each and every initiative. You have to keep in mind that there are, on average, 50 to 60 initiatives described in each sustainability reports, okay? In some cases, you can go up to 150, 200 initiatives.
In each company?
For each company, for each year, right? And this goes back, by the way, 10 or 12 years.
Right.
So the total is about 5 million
data points.
Yes, initiatives. These are behavioral points, right?
So
and they're objective. This is what the company is up to.
So what you're telling me, and for our friends from the corporate world, from the business world, you're spewing out initiatives, putting them on the web. Maurizio and his team have got a web crawler with algorithms which is picking them up and assembling them and structuring them in a data set so we can analyze them.
Exactly.
And it already tells me that companies must be just spewing up initiatives every year if there's 100 per company each year for the last 12 years.
It's tons of stuff.
So now, are you going to be able to see whether they've made any difference?
Yes, and the key is that together with that, obviously, the behavioral data, we also have, of course, the financial performance and the general stakeholder perception about the company, right? And so we're able to run models, statistical models, that can identify the type of initiatives that have a positive impact, not only on stakeholder perceptions, but also on financial markets.
Okay, so going back to the original statement you made about the purpose of the organization and engaging in a holistic way with investors, customers, suppliers, communities, and employees, you can look at initiatives across any of those features. So whether a company is doing stuff with the local schools, and it will come into your data set. And then you're starting to verify whether that's made any difference.
Exactly. First of all, they're categorized in two main ways. First of all, the Sustainable Development Goal that they aspire to contribute to, okay? That's a key categorization. And again, there are algorithms that identify the kind of goals for each of these pieces of text related to the initiative. The second is the type of activity, right? It could be a training program, it could be a philanthropic donation, it could be a change in a process, an internal process, or in a different way to engage, maybe in a partnership with some stakeholders, right? Very different type of behaviors. So what we can do is, for instance, is say, okay, given a specific sustainable development goal, let's say climate change or gender diversity, what are the type of initiatives, right, type of behaviors that, given the context in the country, given the context in the industry, are most effective to maximize impact for stakeholders and for financial markets.
Right.
Before, having such a comprehensive universal data set of the behavior, this was not possible.
And is this unique, this data set? Does
Yes,
anyone else?
I don't know of any.
So, and having that as the focal point of evidence in the center then will allow us to pick up work and engage with companies to look at and see how we could work with them to improve upon these.
In two main ways, fundamentally. There's obviously specific, if you want, tailored engagements, which is research, but at the same time, piloting, change that is tailored to what is really key in that company in that moment, right? What are the challenges, the sustainability challenges that the company is currently trying to tackle? Then that's obviously, we can build all sorts of analysis of their own initiative, that we most likely we will have already, but with their help, we can also, first of all, understand the performance implication of those initiatives, right? The impacts, the social, environmental impact, and eventually the financial impacts. And then, of course, the question is how to then build a portfolio of initiatives that is optimal in terms
have more impact.
So financial and non-financial.
From an innovation point of view, the word experimentation is very important. It's how we learn in practice what might work and what might serve us well. And you've got plans to conduct experiments
on the field,
in the field with our partners who are joining the centre.
Yeah.
So that we can, instead of, perhaps I'm being a little bit unfair to our friends in business, but it does sound like there have been a lot of initiatives thrown up and thrown out there to try and address corporate sustainability. In future, if you work with the Leonardo Centre, we can actually test the prototype and help tune it up so it's going to be more impactful. Is that what?
Exactly. Not only that, but you can then identify the type of initiative and the form of the initiative that works best for your company in that particular context, and then think about scaling it up to the rest of the organization, right?
And so presumably we'll be creating case studies, we'll be creating ideal types and models that will work in one sector and not another, and we can share data across these. That's
exactly the point of creating a sufficiently large. So the second way in which Leonardo will work is with a collective learning process. We call it collabs, collaboratories, right? Where you have a group of 10, 15 companies, either interested, from different sectors, but interested in the same kind of theme, say climate change or net zero emissions, right? Or gender. Or you can have the same, 10, 15 companies, but that are belonging to the same ecosystem, the same sector. It could be, financial services, food, and they might be interested in actually understanding how to maximize, optimize their activities, their initiatives across various sustainability goals, right? And that would happen with not only with a series of workshops that we would be designing with them, and also that the content obviously would be tailored to the interest of the members.
And some of this we can do privately, one-to-one with the company, and some we can do in collective. Let me pause at this point, Maurizio, because I think we've shared the idea of corporate sustainability and the purpose of the Leonardo Centre, and we've talked about why now, and we've given an insight into a very rich, unique data set that is the hub. And then the experimentation, prototyping, and the collaboratory approach. It would be really interesting to hear from our friends on the webinar. If you have any questions from your own business, from your experience of trying to understand what to do next in your own business's sustainability agenda, please put up a question on the chat. We've got one up there at the moment, which is a straightforward one, Maurizio. How can companies become involved in the Leonardo Centre? And I think you'd welcome the opportunity to say, please get involved.
It's the easiest thing I can think of. Obviously you're already partner with IBP, so there is an ongoing channel already existing. We would welcome to have a direct interaction. We can set up a meeting or a call. And the key is to understand, obviously, where your company is in terms of challenges and what is being done, but also what your company is trying to do at this point in time are the key priorities, and design a program that is both a research and an experimentation program, as we're saying.
So it's possible to produce a bespoke report for a particular customer.
Yes.
So that would be an interesting
Yeah, we already have, examples of that,
Yeah.
mock examples that we can certainly show.
I've got a couple of other questions coming up here, Maurizio. Another one is, are all business functions engaged in this transformation? I think the answer's got to be yes, isn't it? But
absolutely. This is actually critical. When I was talking about a new way to think about business and the purpose of business, it's not just having a board that represents has representatives from different stakeholders. It really goes into each and every function, right? So the purchasing obviously needs to integrate the interests, representatives of suppliers and sales and R&D and HR.
It's a big organizational challenge. How you break through those silos, I think it's a very big question.
Absolutely.
And as it is in universities, I mean, we are institutions that need to take our sustainable future in all the facets that you mentioned. So maybe we'll be able to eat our own dog food or whatever you say. Whatever you say in Italy, I don't eat your own pizza.
Exactly, our own pizza.
We got another question here, which is another quite straightforward one, but I think people want to know, are you going to be producing periodic reports? I mean, I think, this is not a 5-year agenda where we wait for 5 years to see the results.
No. We already have the data. Yeah. The data is already being crunched, eaten up. And yes, we are preparing a number of reports by industry, by country. In fact, we're even considering the possibility to create indices rankings of the most sustainable sectors, countries. We're not getting at the company level yet, even though we could. That's very sensitive. We need to discuss it a bit more internally, but the data is a gold mine, and it just...
Well, these sort of league tables, I mean, we've seen what they've done in other related areas to shape behaviours and keep a focus of attention.
Absolutely.
So it could be very important. So we can expect, just to answer the question from our friends on the webinar, we will be producing regular reports, some of them sector-based, some of them on particular issues.
Yes.
And there will be a stream of valuable information that will help guide strategy and decision makings in business, presumably. Good.
And of course, the more support we get from our friends in business and maybe foundations and willing to support the sector, the easier it will be for us to crunch out valuable insights in those reports. Right?
Good. Well, we're getting lots of engagement now on the questions here, Maurizio. There's an interesting one. Do you see the investment community reacting to changes in the governance model around corporate sustainability? We're already seeing a bit of that. Are we going to see much more savvy investment?
Yes.
Activist investors?
Let me tell you what. First of all, yes, impact finance is literally exploding.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different discussion that we might have.
And we've got a finance department here in the business school, which is extremely good, and we can engage.
One of the best in Europe, if not the best currently. The other aspect, more importantly, is the fact that even regular investors and wealth managers are now seeing the example of the big guys. If BlackRock with $6.5 trillion under management is single-mindedly pursuing this agenda and pushing the CEOs of all the top multinational companies to do this, well, you can imagine that all the other are, if they haven't already followed suit, they are working on it, and we can see the signals. They're contacting us. For instance, a couple of them last week contacted us to understand what they can do.
And there's very powerful things you can do if you can shift behind the scenes access to finance, the terms on which finance is given. I know of several friends and colleagues in the city here in London who are pursuing the way in which agricultural investments are made to reduce or incentivize reduction in the use of antibiotics in farming, for example. And it's a powerful lever.
It touches each and every sectors in the economy, of course, right? Yeah. If the conditions under which money is given start to integrate the real environmental and social impact of companies, the whole, socioeconomic system is going to shift. Yeah. It has to.
So there's a question here, which I think is coming through in a way about where are the boundaries here. I mean, you mentioned zero emissions and gender balance in the corporate world, two very important questions.
Out of many.
Out of many, but is there thought, here's the question, for AI and ethics, for example, included in these themes? Of course, it's after Cambridge Analytica and all of our concerns about what happens to our personal data and whether we're reading fake news. I mean, I have to say, this is not a fake webinar. We are sitting here in Imperial College.
And I must say,
how far are you planning the scope of this thing?
It's a very good question. But thank God, this is entirely public information, right? Yeah. It's what anybody can pull down from the internet. These sustainability reports, which are the sources of the data, are available to anybody on the internet. It's just that we have the machine, right? The AI machinery to systematically go through thousands and thousands of them and pick the exact type of text information.
But I think the question is the other way around. We might be picking up the ethical issues about how corporates are using machine learning.
Okay. Yeah. So it's the other way. Yes, that's interesting, actually. I don't think we have given sufficient thought.
Yeah, and you can't do everything. So I mean, I understand where the question's coming from. It's a very good question, but also, we can't bite off more than we can chew in this centre at the beginning. There's a question here about back to the investment community. Will changes in this corporate sustainable behaviour result in lower margins in the short term, less investment?
No, the evidence says very clearly that there is no trade-off, as far as we can tell from the numbers. Essentially, when the two portfolios of meshed portfolios of high, on one hand, the high sustainability performing companies, right? Those that have invested in these, versus the other one are compared. The one with more socially minded investments is always better. There is no crossing between the two lines. It's not like in the first year it might go worse and then recover. It's constantly better from day one.
You've got evidence that purpose and profit can come together. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because some of you will have read Martin Wolf's piece in the Financial Times, I think a week or so ago. A very fundamental set of questions that he's raising about the future of capitalism. And for the Financial Times to take that sort of question on, gives it a certain...
That is already a huge signal of how much the zeitgeist...
It's in the zeitgeist, right?
Of the times, it's really changed, because the Financial Times 10 years ago would not even have raised that question.
And, I think very well aware of the ugly side of the pursuit of profit without thought for all of these issues that the centre is raising. And the sort of mess that has got parts of the world into. So presumably, the answer here is that we can redesign organisations in a way that creates them sustainably into the future, where their purpose comes together with the ability to create profit that continues to provide them the means to reinvest, right?
Yeah, the profit is the source for it, but the important thing is, even logically, is the shift between considering profit as the ultimate goal of everything versus considering profit as a mean to an end, right? Profit is always going to be fundamental. We're not at all challenging the concept of capitalism itself, right? Profit is absolutely at the essence. If that, no profit, no cake.
It reminds me of some interesting questions I think the Economist raised.
Profit for what? That is the
that's your question. Profit for what purpose?
And for what purpose? That is
exactly. And I remember the Economist had a series of articles on is it better to be a charitable organisation, philanthropic organisation, and do good, or be a profit-seeking organisation and do good? And I think that question still sits at the table.
Well, we have actually moved beyond that question, right? So we are actually talking about a transition of the standard logic of the business organization that sees, the primacy of just one stakeholder type, the investors over all the others. As one model, as one way, not the only way certainly, and probably not even the best way, depending on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
There are many other ways that we need to start experimenting with, that we have to figure out. It's also probably not true that we need to have equal salience, equal relevance for all the communities and suppliers and so on. So they're just as important as employees and customers or investors. Every company in every sector in every country will need to figure out what is the appropriate weight to give to all the key stakeholder classes. Mm-hmm. That's what it's basically breaking out of the single mode of operation which we've worked with over the last century or so. That's what's changing. That's the transition that is really important in order to make this capitalist system, the engine for growth and for really higher quality of life for the rest of society. It's a question of taking on the responsibility to play a part really in improving the well-being of the rest of society. And
let me just end then our conversation, Maurizio, with a few thoughts, a little bit more about how we engage with IBP, and a little bit about the internal side of these questions for Imperial College. I mean, one thing that differentiates us from a research lab or a business is that we educate students. Yes. And we have that wonderful refresh rate every few years with a new cohort and new generation coming through. One thing we absolutely know since the financial crash is that our students are now asking us questions about purpose, and many of them for sure will go through and get fabulous jobs which were remunerated, but they're also asking, how can we make a difference? And taking that focal point from our students, combining it with our business colleagues in IBP, maybe we can use that energy to fashion some experiments and some projects.
There are two ways that we're currently already telling them they can make a big difference. One is by the creation of new socially purposed but profit-making enterprises. Yeah. And the other is to be the agents of this transition, this transformation, this experimentation, innovation within established firms in their career. And the engagement of partners is vital for us to be able to do that, because we need organizations that are pursuing this agenda, this objective, and obviously they would be able to do so with young minds that see the same way, and that be trained to actually think about how these kind of experimentation, this kind of innovation, learning, and change processes that are essential.
Good. And so we can be the hub through the Leonardo Centre that works with IBP to help some of these ideas transform into the business community around us.
Yeah, the new business community of the future, exactly.
Good. Maurizio, I think we'll draw a close to our discussion here, unless there's any pressing or big question, burning question someone wishes to key in on the chat right now. We will make available some documents on the centre, and we hope to see you face to face at one or another of our events.
Please feel free to contact.
And feel free to contact the centre and learn more about what we're doing, and we'd be delighted to have you involved in one way or another. And I'll hand back now to Nick to close out.
Thank you, David and Maurizio, for that really stimulating discussion. And so thanks also to our Imperial Business Partners members. Thank you for spending time with us, and I hope you found it insightful. And as you heard from Professor Zollo, we'd like you to be the agents of transition with us. So this is a really strong call to collaborate with both Professor Zollo's Centre Business School and Imperial Business Partners, and we'd be delighted to find ways to work with you. If you want to get in touch to talk further with us on this topic, please email ibp@imperial.ac.uk, and we'll be happy to carry those forward. We'll also be uploading a recording of this webinar, and we'll send members an exclusive YouTube link. If you want to rerun it and share it, please do. And I think it's quite important to say that from our side, we want organizations to engage broadly. So if you're happy to share it inside your organizations, please do so, or please let us know who we should be sharing it with. And we also have our first webinar on sustainability and resource efficiency that is also on our YouTube area that we will reshare with you. And if you want to hear about further topics that you think Imperial can provide insight on, or you'd like us to tackle in this webinar series, please let us know, again, with the email address ibp@imperial.ac.uk. Imperial Business Partners is here to serve our members and create engagement. So the Pathfinder service, as part of your membership, is also there for short turnaround projects, and of course this is an area we can work in as well. So thanks once again. We will close it there. Thank you again to Professor Gann and Professor Zollo, and we look forward to engaging with you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.